The Police and Crime Commissioner for Durham has sparked a debate about cannabis this morning after he said his force is turning a blind eye to those growing it for their own use. Mr Hogg, who is himself a former Deputy Chief Constable, says blanket criminal prosecution of cannabis users and small-scale growers is a waste of scarce police resources. The cultivation of cannabis carries a maximum prison sentence of 14 years for the most serious producers. As the law stands at the moment, if you grow 9 plants or fewer, sentencing ranges from a fine to 1 year in prison. Let's talk to Ron Hogg now, Police and Crime Commissioner for Durham. Hello to you. What exactly are you telling people when it comes to growing cannabis in their own home, for example?
Well, let's be quite clear, growing cannabis is still an offence and we will enforce the law. So, for instance, if you are growing cannabis in your own home and that matter is reported to us, then we will take action. However, what we have to be very careful about these days is to use our police resources wisely. And what my communities are telling me is they want me to tackle the drugs gangs who are growing cannabis on a large scale for profit and creating misery within our communities. Those are the people we'll focus on. And we'll also focus on the drug dealers on the streets because they are causing the real problems. If we get those reports, as I say, of low-level growth and usage, we will deal with them, but we will deal by way of trying to educate people away from cannabis use.
Right, so you won't prosecute them then?
Well, to be honest, if we look at what happens now, and this is a policy which has evolved, it's nothing dramatically new in many regards, people with low-level cannabis growth or cannabis use will not be prosecuted at the moment. They will receive a warning and there'll be no further action. The plants would be seized, for instance, they'd be confiscated. But what we're trying to do now is to work with those who use cannabis illegally and are addicted to it and say, well, look, we will work with you. Rather than give you a caution and just leave it at that, we'll work with you to try and treat your addiction. We think that's far more productive.
Okay, but you're not going to prosecute them, even though we know that the sentencing is there. You could get a fine. You could get a maximum 1 year in jail.
Absolutely, we know that, and the point is we have to prioritise. We have always had to do that within the police service. We've always had to use our discretion, and we need to focus on those areas which will actually help us to minimise harm, and those are the large-scale producers and the dealers on the streets. We'll tackle them, then try to help the small-scale users to get away from their habit.
Okay. Ron Hogg, I hope you can hear Peter Reynolds, who's joining us. Peter Reynolds, tell us which organisation you're from. Good morning.
I'm the president of Clear Cannabis Law Reform. We're the largest UK cannabis lobby group, represents nearly 500,000 people now.
What do you think of what Ron Hogg has told us this morning?
Well, it's excellent news, and it's really about reality, and Durham is only the first domino to fall. I mean, we've been talking to Police and Crime Commissioners since they first began, since they were first established, and there are going to be other PCCs and other constabularies follow suit. It's really about a policy that is facing up to reality and following the evidence, which our governments, not just this government, but successive governments have singularly failed to do. Unfortunately, our politicians are paralysed by media scaremongering about cannabis, most of which is completely inaccurate and over the top. And we look at other countries around the world where regimes have become much more liberal, and what's happened is harm has actually reduced, crime has reduced, access by children has reduced. The great benefits.
That's not why Ron Hogg is pursuing his particular policy in Durham. It's absolutely just about police resources which are stretched.
Well, as I said, it's about reality. And the reality is 3 million people in Britain use cannabis regularly. We consume 3.5 tons of cannabis every single day. Our policy is simply not fit for purpose. And politicians in government after government just bury their heads in the sand and hope it will go away. And now at last we're beginning to see some practical, common sense policies, and it's having to come from the police because our politicians, frankly, are too scared and too paralysed by all the media scaremongering we get in this country. I mean, can I give you an example, Victoria?
Before you do, Peter, I just want to bring in David Reynolds. He's from the National Drug Prevention Alliance. Mr. Reynolds, hello to you.
Hello, good morning.
Hi. So Ron Hogg, who's the Police and Crime Commissioner for Durham, says effectively, if you're a small-scale grower, we're going to try and educate you rather than prosecute you. We're going to try and move you away from A, growing the cannabis and B, smoking it.
Look, at the risk of stating the obvious, police and crime commissioners and chief constables don't make the law, they enforce the law. And it's quite natural that they're going to have priorities. but they've no need to encourage illegal behaviour. And I think the A1 probably goes through their patch. It would be absolute nonsense for them to announce that they're not going to deal with speeding on the A1. So what we have here is a police and crime commissioner who's gone rogue and who's playing politics. And we've already discovered when police and crime commissioners do that it's quite hard to remove them. But they shouldn't have made any announcement. They will have their priorities, and not everybody who gets involved with cannabis should be or is prosecuted. Cautions are quite effective, but they do have to deal with it. And if they leave people growing cannabis, they will find that some of those people will deal it, and some of those people will damage other people, because some young people will be badly affected by it. It is harmful, despite what my rival Peter Reynolds says about it.
Okay, well, let me just go back to Ron Hogg. You can answer that. Mr. Reynolds is accusing you of A, going rogue, and B, encouraging cannabis use.
Well, that's abject nonsense. I served 30 years in the police service. I just said to a colleague, my first drugs raid in 1979, and I've not seen anything change. We need a different direction, and that's what I'm trying to encourage here, that we can have a national debate, a sensible debate about drugs use across the board, and people need to listen. The current strategy doesn't work, the current legislation doesn't work, and as I say, the thrust of what we're trying to do is to minimise harm through taking a sensible approach to drug use and not a soft approach.
Okay.
Well, can I just come back on that? I mean,
yeah.
Mr. Hogg effectively makes my point for me. He's a minor police and crime commissioner in a small county force, and he's playing politics. He has the wherewithal and the ability to make representations to government and to the Home Secretary privately. He doesn't have to indulge in a mass media campaign. Appearing on Channel 4 News last night, he obviously gave a press release to various newspapers, because I was contacted about this yesterday by two of them. That's a media campaign. That is not the function of a police and crime commissioner in Durham. He's gone rogue. He should be removed.
It's outrageous. I mean, you know, what David is saying about drivers speeding on the A1 is an instance where a crime actually has a victim, or potentially has a victim. Using cannabis, has no victim. Right? What creates victims with cannabis is an illegal criminal market, and it's our present laws that cause that. They create the situation where illegal cannabis farms are set up in houses that become farvists. They create the situation where dealers are on the streets selling them to children. If we had a regulated market with the sort of sensible policies that Mr. Hogg is pursuing, as they've got now in America and in many other countries, would reduce harm. And that's what drugs policy has to be about.
Thank you. Peter Reynolds from the campaign group Clear, which wants to see cannabis laws in the UK reformed. Ron Hogg, thanks for your time. Police and Crime Commissioner for Durham. And we heard from David Reynolds, who suggested Ron Hogg had gone rogue and should be removed from his post. Right, back to Norman Smith.